Childhood is a time for play, discovery, and growth. But for some children, it also means stepping into a role many adults find challenging: caregiving. Welcome to Ask an MS Expert. I'm John Strum, your moderator and the host of the Real Talk MS podcast. Each week, Real Talk MS reaches thousands of people in more than 100 countries around the world with the news that people affected by MS need to know. My wife, Jean, lived with progressive MS for 23 years. So I've had a front row seat experiencing all the ways that MS can impact a family. Today, I'll be asking our expert the questions you want answered. Please feel free to post your comments and questions on Facebook, YouTube, or Twitch. MS Navigators will be online throughout today's live program, answering your questions and connecting you to resources. Caring for a parent or a family member with MS is life-changing, especially when that journey begins in childhood. Today, we're talking with Michaela Pohl, who stepped into caregiving at a young age. Michaela is a wife, sister, daughter, and mother of 2 young children. And Michaela has been a caregiver for her mother, who lives with MS, since she was in high school. Michaela has her dream job as a licensed mental health therapist, supporting individuals who have experienced trauma, grief, and loss. She's also a volunteer and co-facilitator of Teen Support MS, a monthly support group for adolescents between the ages of 14 and 19 who have a parent living with MS. Michaela knows firsthand that the needs of young caregivers can sometimes be overlooked, and she understands the importance of advocating on their behalf so that their voices are heard and they feel supported. Welcome, Michaela. Thanks for being with us today.
Hi, John. Thank you, and Emily and the MS Society for inviting me to be here. I'm honored.
So, can you tell us what it was like for you to have a parent with MS and how you began helping with your mother's care?
Yeah. I want to preface this program by saying that every young caregiver's experience is different. Every person who lives with MS is affected differently. And this is my own personal experience as a young caregiver to my mom who has MS. And what I hope for today is that I can validate other young caregivers so that they feel less alone. So I am 36 years old, and my mom was diagnosed with MS the same year that I was born, right after I was born. And prior to her MS diagnosis and progression of the disease, she was a full-time, she worked full-time as a commercial real estate appraiser and co-owned her business. She took care of all the in-house responsibilities. She volunteered at church and my school. She saw many, many friends. And it had to be devastating, excuse me, for her to receive the MS diagnosis and see how it affected her body throughout the years. I can only imagine what that was like. And much of her MS has taken away those abilities that she used to do prior to her diagnosis. Her MS significantly progressed when I was 14 years old, so I was a freshman in high school. That same year, my mom's sister, so my aunt, died from complications with MS. And then my mom informed me and my sister and many of her family members and friends that she had MS. A lot of us did not know about it. I think it honestly was only my dad who knew about it for those first 14 years. So when I was 14, that's when I started my caregiving role. And I was a co-caregiver with my dad and my younger sister, who's 3 years younger than me. During my teenage years, my dad traveled a lot for work, and so my sister and I were home often with our mom. In that, the roles I took on as a caregiver, they just happened. I don't remember ever being asked to take care of my mom. It was expected of me from my mom, by my mom and dad. And it's honestly all that I knew as a teenager. So I had to figure out how to balance being a teenager and taking care of my mom. And the caregiving role progressed gradually for me. I remember the first thing was she had to have a walking stick, and I had to help her be on the other side of her. She walked in from the car to buildings to help her maintain her balance. And then it gradually progressed to helping her with personal hygiene cares and other things that I'll get into more in this program. Um, I have, since starting my career and starting having a family of my own, my caregiving roles have changed. I am now more of a less hands-on direct caregiver to my mom, and I support her in other ways in the capacity that I have. So I do a lot of research for my mom and dad in terms of MS treatments, in terms of equipment that can help her, in terms of outside respite care. I host all the family meals and holidays at my house. I will drop off meals for my mom and dad. And I have found healthy ways to cope with the grief of the loss of my relationships with both my mom and dad, since they don't have the capacity to be active parents and active grandparents in mine and my sister's family's lives.
Well, I want to get back to several of the points you raised. We know that MS is different for everyone who lives with it. Thinking about your mom's specific MS symptoms, which were the most difficult for you to cope with?
So the most difficult would be the emotional symptoms that have come along with her MS. Um, her emotional symptoms include mood swings, and she easily becomes irritated and angry. And that has been expressed towards her caregivers. So me, my mom, or excuse me, my sister, and my dad. Um, so in simple terms, I never knew if I was going to be helping my nice mom or my mean mom. And that made the physical tasks of caregiving for her very difficult because I still had to continue that task and make sure she was safe, make sure that she was dressed, make sure that she was fed, and still trying to cope with the emotional part of it. So back when I was a teenager, the emotional symptoms of MS and mood swings, they weren't discussed or identified very often. And also, mental health wasn't recognized in our society like it is today. And I have learned that people with chronic illnesses can also have mental health disorders as well. And I don't know if my mom's mood swings is because of her MS, mental health, or a combination of both. Um, I really wish, though, that when I was a teenager, that I knew that it was something other than myself, because I blamed it a lot on myself. My mom was was in denial about her MS for a really long time, and also reluctant to receive help excuse me, of my dad and my sister and me, and that made it a really hard space to navigate for me as a young caregiver.
What kinds of things did you find yourself helping with most often, especially as you were in those teenage years and really starting to assume that role as a caregiver?
Yeah, so um, I would help make meals. I would help with laundry. I would do cleaning around the house. I would help her wash her hair, all the personal hygiene tasks, help her um, use a toilet. I would help with, once I got my license, she was no longer driving, so I would drive her and my sister when my dad wasn't home to and from activities and appointments. Um, I would um, also, sorry, um, it's kind of hard to think about this. Um, and I would also help her with if she had some short-term memory loss, which happened, I would have to really be patient with that and respond in a patient way because she would sometimes forget something that I told her 2 minutes ago. So those are all things that I had to support her with.
Was there anything there specific that kind of stands out as being especially difficult for you then, or the flip side, especially meaningful for you then?
I would say the most difficult is doing all those physical caregiving tasks when she had her mood swings. That was the most difficult. The most meaningful, and I didn't mention this in what I had just talked about, was I also was like a parent figure to my younger sister. Um, and I think helping raise my sister during the most influential years of her life as a teenager and young adult, that was so special to me. Um, because I showed up for her in ways that my parents didn't have the capacity to do. I would drive her to her sports activities. I would be at those sports activities and choir activities. I would be there to support her emotionally. I helped guide her when she was trying to figure out what educational route she wanted to go, what career route she wanted to go. Um, so that's something that is most meaningful to me is being there to support my sister.
Who or what was most helpful to you as a young caregiver for your mother?
Um, so I was really fortunate that I randomly met a friend in high school. We were both in band together, and she was very outgoing. I was very reserved, and she saw that I was wearing an MS walk shirt at school one day, and she said, "Who do you know that has MS?" And I told her my mom. She goes, "My mom does too. You have to go to," she told me, "You have to go to MS youth camp." Um, I live in Minnesota, and the Minnesota chapter used to have a MS youth camp once a week during the summer for kids who had parents with MS. So I decided to give that a try the summer before my junior year of high school. And I met so many other teenagers there who also have parents with MS, and we were able to connect and understand one another and be there for one another. Also, all the MS events, there were a lot of youth events put on where we volunteered, where we fundraised, and I got to see other people and be with my friends who I'd met at camp at that time. I'd say other people who were really helpful were I had some friends' parents who took me in like their own daughter in high school and college. They would have me over to their house, and I wasn't expected to have to take care of anyone. I got to have meals made for me. Um, I also I was invited on a few of my friends' families' vacations. I remember this one time in college, my friend said, "Hey, my mom and dad want you to come back to Wisconsin with me. That's where she lived for spring break. Do you want to come with me?" And it was great because I got a break from school and from caregiving. And I really appreciated that. I also was college roommates with someone that I met through the MS Society Youth Camp. And that was really helpful making that adjustment and transition to college my freshman year. I have also had a relationship with my nanny who took care of me when I was an infant. And she has really filled in some of the parent roles for me in terms of taking care of me and also grandparent role for my kids right now. And so I'm really grateful. And I'm sure there's other people out there that have helped me, but it's a lot of people who filled in those losses that my parents could not um, provide for me and other people could.
Being a teenager can be challenging all by itself. What was it like for you balancing just being a teenager with your role as a caregiver? Were there times when you felt conflicted between wanting, I guess, what I'll call the life of a typical teenager
Mhm.
and still being needed to help at home?
Like I said previously, I don't think I was ever given the choice of being a young caregiver. So it's all that I knew as a teenager. Um, Reflecting back to that time, I don't know how I did it all in high school and in college. I was a straight A student, took high level classes. I had a part-time job starting my junior year of high school, added on hours during the summers. When my dad was traveling, I would be, and especially at night, because nighttime was really hard on my mom, because she was so exhausted by the end of the day. So I had to be there at home taking care of her. I was taking care of my sister. And I also somehow found ways to be with friends. I had a really good friend group. We made good choices, and also be able to to connect with my friends from MS camp and do volunteer activities and MS events with them too. So I don't know, I just balanced it. I did it. Um, all of that took a big toll on my mental health. And I didn't realize that till I was taken out of the space of that direct hands-on caregiving. Um, I noticed that I have always had anxiety, and that was coming out a lot in school, in relationships, socially, and personally. And so once I realized that, I went and met with my own mental health therapist, and that was extremely helpful. And I think, and I really wish that I had that mental health support earlier on in my life. Um, I think I missed out on not having a mom who could be there to support me, excuse me, through those teenage and young adult years. I'm fortunate that my dad was able to be there for me in the ways that he could be, and that I also had those other like fill-in parents that I talked about previously. And I've always had a really, really, really good group of friends. Um, like all my different eras of life, from childhood, high school, college, grad school, and beyond, I've always had a really supportive group of friends for me.
Caregiving can sometimes present us with situations, with moments that are actually frightening. Maybe it's because we're feeling a little overwhelmed. Maybe it's because we don't know exactly what to do in that moment to be a good caregiver. I'm wondering, as a young caregiver, were there times where you found yourself worried or scared in that moment?
All the above. Um, so I felt scared walking into the house, not knowing if I was going to get nice mom or mean mom. So I was walking on eggshells a lot. Um, I also felt worried when I walked into the house. Was my mom going to be on the floor because she fell? This actually happened at least one time when I was in high school, and my dad was traveling, and so I had to go and knock and call a neighbor and knock on her door, who was a family friend that was able to come over and help me get my mom up. I also remember a time in college when I was go in a movie theater late at night watching a movie with some friends. I come out of the movie theater and my cell phone had a bunch of calls and a voicemail and a text message from my dad saying that my mom had taken a really bad fall and that she broke her collarbone. And so he was in the emergency room with her. So he was asking if I could get home so that I could go stay with my sister, who was in high school at that time. So my friends were great. They got me back to where I lived in college. I packed a bag, got in my car, and I drove home. And then I was there for my sister while my dad was at the ER with my mom. I also feel worried that at some point in my life I'll be diagnosed with MS. It comes and goes in my mind. I don't focus on it very often, but that worry is there. And because of the supportive community that I built and that I am fortunate to be surrounded by, and as a teenager, I didn't feel alone all that often. However, thinking back, the moments that I felt most alone were those moments when I was providing those caregiving responsibilities to my mom, and then she would respond in an angry way towards me. I would finish the task I was doing because wanted her to be safe. And then I'd go to my room and I'd cry, or I'd talk to my dad or my sister or friends. Um, so that's the one time that I can remember of feeling most alone.
What kind of impact did being a caregiver have on your relationship with your mom?
Mm, a really hard one. Um, it has put a lot of strain on our relationship. And it's also, there's been a lot of strain put on my relationship with my dad as well. And so for many years, I have been grieving the loss of the relationships that I wish I had with my parents or that I hope to have with my parents. Um, and I've been figuring out ways to cope with that and handle that in hopefully, I think, in very healthy ways. and by surrounding myself with people who can be there and fill in for those losses that they aren't able to provide to me.
When you think back on those years that you spent as a young caregiver and all the way through today, perhaps,
Mhm.
which emotions come up first for you?
So I have a lot of both and feelings for this one. Um, I feel both sadness and happiness. I feel both anger and hopefulness. I feel both confusion and gratefulness. And I feel both frustration and pride.
Well said. What skills or strengths do you think you developed because of your caregiving experiences?
So this is why I feel grateful for my caregiving experience. Um, I think some of these skills and strengths I was born with, and because I was a caregiver, I had to embrace and really utilize at a young age. Um, I was forced to grow up really fast and be independent, way faster than most of my high school peers. And so I went to college. I knew how to clean. I know how to cook. I knew how to do laundry. I had college friends come to me saying, Michaela, will you help me will you show me how to do my laundry? And I love being able to help them. And I also loved that I could just rely on myself for that too. And I knew how to do it. Um, I also have a lot of empathy for people who are going through hard times. Uh, this is why I do the work I do as a mental health therapist and focus in the areas of grief and loss and trauma. I'm also a helper. I show up for friends and family when they are going through hard times, and I show up for them to celebrate the joyful times. Um, I also have the ability to anticipate other people's needs, like my husband's, my kids, my friends, my sisters, my clients. Might be their emotional needs, their physical needs, their personal needs, sometimes, oftentimes, before they even know what they need. Um, I'm also a planner and an organizer. And I think this is part of my type A personality. However, I also really use it as a strength to cope with the things I couldn't control as a teenager. Um, I was always thinking one step ahead of what was happening and what was going to come. And that has really helped me academically, helped me in my profession, helped me as a parent, and helped me in many of my relationships. I also am not afraid to ask for help when I need it. This was not easy to do to start. It has taken a lot of work for me to get here. And I'm so grateful that I am able to ask for help and I know who I can ask for help with depending on what I need. So I try to delegate those asking for help needs to different people in my life.
Well, I want to thank you for sharing some important insights about what it's like to be an MS caregiver, especially at such a young age. I have a two-part question for you, I think. What would you say is the most important takeaway that you'd like our viewers to remember and to use? And what advice would you share with other young caregivers and with their parents?
But the biggest takeaway is that you are not alone. Life, being a caregiver can be really hard. Being a young caregiver to your parent, it can create a lot of different feelings and you can really have strengths that come out of it. Uh, I would also like to suggest to both young caregivers and their parents to find a community who you can connect with, who have your shared experience as being a young caregiver and with MS. That could be in person or virtual support groups. That could be MS Society events. That could be safe online chat rooms. That could be safe and reliable social media influencers. Hearing other stories will validate your own and make you feel less alone. My other suggestion would be that caregivers are not only limited to immediate family members to help the person who has MS. Caregiver can also mean trusted extended family members, trusted friends, trusted outside professional help. It's important for the caregiving tasks to be delegated to other people because caregivers need to find balance and they really need to take care of themselves. In order to provide the most effective and healthy caregiving to your loved one is to take care of yourself at the same time.
Thank you for being with us today, Michaela.
Thank you, John.
Today's program survey has now been posted in the chat for your feedback. Please take a minute and complete it to help us create programs and topics with you in mind. Please be sure to visit the National MS Society's website for information and resources on MS, connection opportunities, and ways for you to get involved. You can also connect with an MS navigator to receive personalized support by phone, email, or through the Society's website by chat. A recording of today's program will be posted on the MS Society's website at nationalmssociety.org/msexpert, as well as on Facebook and YouTube. Finally, I'll invite you to join me each week on the Real Talk MS podcast, where we continue the conversation that we start here. You can find Real Talk MS on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, or wherever you find your favorite podcasts. Thanks for joining us for Ask an MS Expert. We'll see you next week.